Well, welcome everyone to this evening's meeting of the White Allies Network. And our topic for this evening is our third in our series on hidden racism. We've been looking at some of the racism that's perhaps less obvious to many of us. Not it's very obvious to those that suffer from it, but doesn't necessarily hit the news. And so we've been looking at things like microaggressions. We've been looking at the East and Southeast Asian experience, which doesn't necessarily get as much press as others. But today I'm delighted that we've got a long-standing member of our network, Neil, who's going to look at take us through the mixed heritage experience, drawing from his own experience, which you'll hear all about in a while, but also bringing in the experience of others too, to this perhaps neglected area of racism in terms of our attention. So let me just take us on to our agenda. I'm going to remind us all of our purpose in a moment. The qualities of our spaces, these are like the ground rules that we ask everyone to keep. We are talking about very sensitive issues, and we want to create a space which is safe enough for people to be able to share openly. Friend and colleague of mine, Shelley, who may be joining us this evening, talks about courageous spaces as well. We want it to be courageous, but also safe enough for people to be able to share. I usually give us an update on race and racism in the news, just to draw our attention to what's been going on out there that's not going away. And then the main topic. And Neil's going to take us through a presentation. He's got a couple of videos in the middle of that, probably last around 40 minutes before we open it up for whole group Q&A and discussion, and others might share their experience. So that'll probably be about 15-20 minutes towards the end before I just round things off, and we will then turn the recording off. If you can stay beyond 9:30, and a lot of people do like to have further conversations for about 15-20 minutes, then please do so. And that's completely unrecorded, so the rest of it is recorded. But if at any point that you say something you prefer not to be on the recording, then I'm the editor of it, and I can sort that one out for you and just edit out anything that you don't want to be there. So that's our agenda for this evening. Just a reminder of our purpose then as a network. We aspire to be true allies against racism. It's not really for us to say whether we are or not, but it is up to those that we are allied with, and which is why we have a council of reference made up of people of colour that can keep us true to this aim and stop us from getting above ourselves or into any kind of white saviorism, anything like that. But the White Allies Network aims to help us to become true allies of people of colour in the fight against racial injustice. It also, for those of us who are white, to learn about ourselves, our histories, privileges, and our impact, but also to learn about people of colour, their histories, experiences, and perspectives, and not just to be a talking shop, but to develop ideas for action that we can take individually, collectively, and in partnership with others towards racial justice. And just to emphasize, although we've got white allies in the name, everybody is absolutely welcome. In fact, we really do appreciate people of color who can journey with us as co-mentors, as we call them. But it's about white people taking responsibility for our own education and engaging in dialogue about issues which impact race and racial justice. So that's our aim, and the ground rules, if you like, or qualities of our spaces that we want to create are the following. We commit to be respectful and non-judgmental, being slow to make negative judgments about others, being aware of the intersectionality of experiences. While we're just focusing on racism in these sessions, we realize that a number of other protected characteristics interweave with this and make things pretty complex for some that experience a number of different prejudices in different forms. We want to be humble and curious, though. We want to be allowed to say we don't actually know at the moment. We want to find out. If we offend unintentionally, we want to be able to say sorry authentically. But really keeping our minds open, being curious about views very different to our own. Sometimes something might trigger us that someone says, and we just want to pause before responding if we feel triggered, to make sure that we don't say something we regret in response to that. We want to be mindful and heartful, careful, thinking before we speak, considerate in our contributions and language. Not afraid to be emotional about this. This is an emotional issue, but also empathetic, not rationalizing away each other's feelings, which is sometimes what white people do when they get a bit defensive. It's not rationalize away anyone's feelings, but also be able to express ours too. We need to be open and authentic, able to speak our own truth, sharing our own experiences and perspectives, but also courageous, as I said, open to challenge and to be challenged. The courage to confront ourselves and others in these spaces. We also want this to be a confidential space so that if anything is shared, that it's kept confidential. Anything personal that's shared is kept confidential. And as I said, I will delete anything from the recording later that anyone asks me to in terms of something they have personally shared that they prefer not to have on the recording. The recording will be posted on our YouTube channel, the Deeper Leaders YouTube channel, where you can access the recordings of previous meetings too. And finally, we want this space to be a space where people are kind and other-centered, sensitive to each other's needs, building relationships first. Some people need a bit more time and space than others to be able to share, and that's okay. For those of us who are white, we don't want to wallow in white guilt, though. We recognize that becoming anti-racist isn't about us, about centering us as white people, defending our ego, but it's about serving a greater cause. So those are the ground rules, if you like. We call them qualities of our spaces. My assumption from here is that everyone that's still with us and is not leaving us is going to be able to sign up to those ground rules as well. Okay. So, bit of an update of race and racism in the news. Reuters in February, this is since our last meeting, these are a few things that I picked out. Apparently UK police are aiming to fix stop and search at last. I wouldn't hold your breath, it's taken a little while, hasn't it? But there is some admittance of it's not going right, thankfully, and a commitment to do something different. We shall watch this space. Guardian, as usual, has published a number of different articles. This is actually from before our last meeting, but I wanted to mention it because Keon West, the author of Science of Racism, has just published this book, and I've bought it, and I would certainly recommend it. I'm only a little way into it as yet, but although surveys suggest the majority in the UK don't think we're a racist society, he brings out the stats and the figures and the evidence for racism existing. And what I like is this, as the title says, it's scientific approach. That's a book well worth reading. Now, everything that's happening over the other side of the pond and this rollback on diversity policies, well, good old Co-op in the UK is standing up for what they believe in, and they suggest that risks undoing decades of progress. And there's a few other companies too that are standing firm, while others, unfortunately, are rolling back. But Co-op is out there with the best of them. And then, of course, this purging of DEI initiatives in the States, and unfortunately it's really well qualified and experienced people, like this commander, General CQ Brown Jr. Lost his job, basically being accused of just getting the job because of his race. Sometimes I can't quite believe what's happening over in the States at the moment. Also, they are purging their libraries and the armed forces too of books related to DEI. They have, after complaints, put Maya Angelou's biography back in the library though. It's good to hear. And then sometimes it seems as if we are following the lead over there in terms of big headlines. And this was deemed a big mistake when our own Prime Minister in the UK published these videos about migrants being deported pretty roughly. It kind of had echoes really of what's going on in the States there, and there's a lot of criticism for choosing to do that. And then the Beeb had a number of stories. This one on trying to remember the name of the cricketer here. It was Majid Haq, who was the whistleblower on the racism in cricket report, has been victimized since then, unfortunately. So that saga continues. And then Harvard is one of the few universities that are standing up to Trump, even though they've lost funding. Mind you, they've got quite a lot of funding, one of the richest universities in the world. So let's hope they continue to hold out while others capitulate on their values. And then finally, just today, I don't know whether you heard it early today, but although the officer who shot Chris Carver here, not far from here in Streatham, was found not guilty of murder, he is being investigated for serious misconduct. So that saga continues and is not going away anytime soon. So those are just some of the items of news that I've spotted since last time. But without further ado, what I'd like to do is to get into our topic and hand over to Neil. Welcome, Neil. Thank you so much for being willing to speak to us on this subject this evening. I'm going to stop sharing so he can share his screen now.
So that's me about something like nearly 40 years ago. So I've had some experiences in the meetings in these quarterlies where some people have assumed I'm white British from the small caption which we have on the screen. So I lost all my hair in about 18 years ago, but that's what I used to look like. So when I was walking around the streets of Liverpool, near Liverpool football ground, people certainly shared what they thought of me, shall we say that. So yeah, my father was from Calcutta, came here in the 50s and married my white British mother, and my sister and I came along, and yeah, I grew up in mostly London and then the Midlands, where I had a bit of a torrid time of it. And then I went to London again and Liverpool, and then I've been on the south coast in Bournemouth for the last 28 years. So I think I do training for anti-racism and allyship around the country to social workers, but this is the first time I've covered the subject matter of myself in that sense that I'm mixed heritage. So I like the term mixed heritage. It's not the most popular term for those who are not from one particular racial background. And so mixed race is the one that, excuse me, most people use. They in America, biracial is very common. Dual heritage is okay, but what happens if you've got grandparents from 4 different continents? You know, that just knocks that on the head. Multi-ethnic, we're trying to get away from ethnic minorities from the BME kind of label. And mixedness is something which is a kind of phenomenon, really, which is referred to in a couple of books I'm going to talk about later. So on that screen there, you've got Bob Marley, Steve, I don't know all of them, Stephen Graham, who I discovered is mixed heritage. His father was from Jamaica and his stepfather's Jamaican, and his half-brother's mixed heritage as well. So you've got Fleur East, Naomi Campbell, and David Olusoga. Don't know the rest. So the reason why I don't use mixed race is it implies a concept of pure races to some people, not everyone, which is a bit of a false and potentially harmful idea. And the idea there's one human race, really. And we have to talk about race this, race that, but yeah, that's what I think anyway. It can be seen as stigmatizing, and some individuals may not identify with it, and that's me and quite a few others. If there's no biological or scientific justification for racial categorization, how can a person be a mixture of races? You know, there's various reasons. It may contribute to the persistent illusion in many spheres of life that there are different races. And finally, collectively determined and contemporary identities are needed that are not influenced by past slave masters. Yeah, so you get the gist. So here we have the set of terminologies that I could find that used to be or are still used in other nations. for mixed heritage. So Métis is the French who ran Canada and still have Quebec as a French language state, referred to people as Métis, which is Saskatchewan in the West, Native
Nice books
American,
today.
Native Canadian.
And I've got Laura Ashley.
Can someone mute themselves, please?
Yeah, I've just muted them. It's fine.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway, that's the term in Canada. Muwalad has been used in Spain historically when the Moors, North Africans, ran it from about 500 to 14 something. Meletsi is a Turkish name for mixed heritage. Coloured comes from the original US and South African term, and in Britain it was used until probably, I think it was dying out in the 1980s. Half caste is something I particularly object to, and that came from the British Raj in India, where the Indian population couldn't get used to British Raj white administrators getting married to Hindu or Sikh Indian women. So they called them half caste because the woman had a caste, but the child, they didn't know how to deal with it. So that's where it came, and the British brought it here. Thank you very much. Mulatto is a very abusive term in Spanish which is basically a mule that describes what they called one black and white parent during Spanish slavery. Mestizo is used across the Latin American world still as someone with mixed ancestry. And quadroon is something which belongs to the slave era. And I just wanted to give it there as an illustration of what used to happen for people like me. So the history of coloured people in the US goes back to Africans being taken as slaves to Virginia in 1619 by the British. And over the next 250 years, white colonial and then slave owners basically raped and sexually assaulted enslaved African women. And that's where mixed heritage came from, you could say, really. And down through the generations, it's been passed through. These slave owners also had relationships which some of them left plantations to their wives or daughters who were enslaved women. The children resulting from these relationships were sometimes given elevated status on occasion, rarely, but they were, because of their proximity to white supremacy. Many of today's African American population trace their ancestry to this era. They'd like to go further back to Africa, but they have no chance to trace their roots. And there's still a National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People who haven't ever changed their name in about 70 years. So no one else uses that term, but that organisation still does. So it's kind of a legacy. So here we have South Africa, and that's a Cape coloured person with an identity card under apartheid regime from 1948 to 1990. So they had their categories for people, and there was the black majority population and coloureds, and there were lots of people who were classed as coloureds. That basically meant they weren't black and they weren't white. So Indian people, the British took over there, as in Gandhi in 1912. And Cape Malay, who were taken by the British from Malaysia, they were also known as coloureds, a subgroup of coloureds. And Chinese were also another subgroup of coloureds. But anyway, the whole thing was measured against the proximity to whiteness in the apartheid system. Now, Brazil, I feel, is quite I'd like to celebrate Brazil because they have really taken on mixed heritage with a kind of positivity. So it is an official category, and most Brazilians, the majority of their nation, identify as mixed race. So in the 2022 census, 92.1 million Brazilians identified as mixed race, which is 45.3% of the population. and the mixed race category includes those of indigenous heritage there as well. But yeah, I like to celebrate Brazil. So here in Britain, approximately 1.7 million people identified as mixed race or heritage in the 2021 census. That's about 3%. Having mixed or multiple ethnic backgrounds. This was a significant increase. It tripled in 20 years and from previous censuses. So I think there's a growing population of younger people who are coming into the world, mostly in London, I have to say. That's the majority. Number of people identifying as mixed race. Yeah, there you go. So mixed heritage populations in other parts of the world. So you've got Canada. This is from their census information. It's not comparing like with like, but 7% in Canada, 34% in Australia, and that's multiple ancestries of people who came from outside of Australia. So it's not really the same categorization as here. USA is 10.2%. That's kind of, you can compare that to ours. France, 9%, although it's not officially calculated, it's only estimated. The French won't calculate it. Colombia's got 40% of mestizos, as they know. Venezuela, 51.6%. Mexico, 58%. So shows you that in quite a few countries around the world, mixed heritage is very prevalent. Because I'm going to show you some history slides now. Alessandro de' Medici was Duke of Florence, the Florentine Republic. And his mother was from North Africa, a local peasant woman. So there were dozens of paintings made of him, and they were all depicted him as white. And this is the one he commissioned, and that's why it's depicted, he's depicted as he was. So then you've got the speculation about Queen Charlotte, George III's wife. There's no real proof of any of this. Some historians say that she had Black Portuguese roots, but it's conjecture. There's no facts about it. Alexandre Dumas, who wrote Count of Monte Cristo and the Three Musketeers, his father was a Haitian soldier, black Haitian soldier, who joined the French army and rose to the rank of general. So I didn't know that until I looked up in Google famous people with mixed heritage. So that's been airbrushed out of history, in my view. Mary Seacole, who's familiar to a lot of people, especially all the children who learn about her in the national curriculum. So she was a nurse and natural healer during the Crimean War and had a Scottish father and black Jamaican mother. And there we have Lillian Barder. I found her, and she was one of the first black women to join the RAF. At the beginning of World War II, she rose to the rank of corporal. So unsung heroes, just to show mixed heritage going back in history in Britain to at least 80, 90 years ago. So mixed heritage families in Britain. There's a history going back 400 years of some successful families here. Early 20th century narratives were very critical and scathing about dirt, filth and poverty with no hope and no identity. There was a very wholesale negative stuff. But by the 1930s, Peter Aspinall and someone called Caballero, they were researching from University of Canterbury, and they found that there was a lot more positive acceptance of people with mixed heritage in the 1930s than they had realized as researchers before. So here's some well-known people. So we've got David Olusoga, who is a personal hero of mine. He certainly has put mixed heritage on the map in terms of all the documentaries and books that he's made, in my opinion. You've got Arcala, who is rapper, and well worth looking up on YouTube to see and reading his book Natives. Got Hirsch, who's written a book, Brit, on race identity and belonging. And that was in 2018. And she talks all about her mixed heritage. And finally, Emma Dabiri, who's actually Irish. And she's written a book about Don't Touch My Hair and what people can do next. So here we come to the crux of the matter. With for me, in my early 20s, having arrived in London and go to a party and someone says, "Where are you from?" And I would say, "I'm from London." "No, where are you really from?" "I'm from London." "Where were you born?" "London." "Okay, so where were your parents born?" And there's the interrogation. It's you don't look like us, you're not white, so you must be from somewhere else. And yeah. When my daughter was looking at these slides, she said, "Oh yeah, I get that twice a week," she said. She's got Polish, Indian, and white British heritage, and people ask her twice a week where she's from. So that, I think, is a good illustration of why I call it the interrogation. So, what are you? Are you a half caste or mulatto? That was one of my colleagues in Bournemouth, Christchurch, and Poole Council, and her admin colleagues said that to her on her first day in her team. So that gives you an idea of some of the friendly reception that people get in various parts of the country. That's Natalie and Naomi Evans, who they've written this book called Mixed Race Experience, which is really great. And they interview people and talk about their own lives. So I can recommend that one in terms of learning more about mixed heritage. So here we have a video which is young people illustrating how they live with mixed heritage, mainly in London.
We're not able to include the recording of this video in this presentation for copyright reasons, but you can view it yourself on YouTube. Well worth a watch. It lasts 4 minutes 51 seconds. So do pause this video now and watch what we watched on the night.
So, what are some of the issues people with mixed heritage experience in Britain today? So experiences of mixed heritage people are diverse and shaped by various factors, including their specific ethnic backgrounds, appearance, socioeconomic status, and the communities they live in. The increasing visibility and growing population of mixed heritage individuals in the UK, driving a need for greater understanding, recognition, and inclusive practices within society. So there's several categories here, which I'll go through one by one now. So there's two famous mixed heritage American, one ex-president, one ex-vice president. Individuals of mixed heritage may experience internal conflicts and external pressures regarding their identity. And that depends on upbringing, I think, and context. There'll be more said about that later. They might feel they don't fully belong to any single ethnic group, and they feel like an in-betweener and constantly explaining or justifying their background, which is extremely prevalent because other people define you. Can be exacerbated when people say, "What are you?" which I illustrated earlier. So stereotyping and misrecognition. They can be subjected to stereotypes associated with any of their ethnic backgrounds, sometimes simultaneously or conflictingly. This may also be misrecognized or have their heritage dismissed based on their appearance. So yeah, unfortunately, it happens quite a lot. Experiences of racism and discrimination. They can experience racism from individuals within any of their represented ethnic groups, as well as from those outside of their heritage. This can manifest as racial slurs, microaggressions, or feelings of exclusion. They might face the feeling of being too black to be white, or too white to be black. There are cases I come across as a social worker of white grandparents being viciously racially abusive to their grandchildren on a daily basis. Sad to say, but I'm afraid it's not isolated. Lack of representation and understanding. The experiences of mixed heritage people are not well understood or represented in mainstream society, media, or even within discussions about race and ethnicity. This lack of visibility can contribute to feelings of isolation and a lack of community. So everything's seen as framed in a binary way, which can exclude the nuances of mixed heritage. Pressure to choose or identify with one side or the other. So external pressure can often be brought to bear and saying you should identify more strongly with one part of your heritage. It can come from family, friends, broader society, and you'll feel like you're forced. Navigating different cultural expectations. Individuals from mixed backgrounds may need to navigate different cultural norms, values, and expectations from their different heritages. This can sometimes lead to internal conflict or challenges. And that depends on how their heritages play out in terms of their lives, really. I mean, I didn't know anything about my South Asian family at all till I was 30, so I only had white British people around me to go on, because my father chose not to share any of it. Mental health impacts. Challenges associated with navigating mixed heritage in a society that often prioritizes singular identities can impact mental health. So research suggests that individuals of mixed heritage may be at greater risk of experiencing mental health issues as they grapple with identity development. This particularly comes through being in local authority care often, and mixed heritage figures. I didn't want to go into mental health, but in detail, but the mixed heritage figures for being detained under the Mental Health Act are disproportionately, I think, about 4 times higher than white British people. So you've got safeguarding issues. There was a report recently came out, which is only about a month ago, where the social workers dealing with, and other staff dealing with safeguarding referrals, did not focus on race, ethnicity, or culture when they analysed the situations and tried to come up with safeguarding plans. That led to missed opportunities to protect Black, Asian, and mixed heritage children from harm. It indicates systemic issues and the vulnerability of children from mixed backgrounds as they're not adequately addressed. So here's another video which is quite interesting. It was on Newsnight. Don't know when, but quite interesting.
Again, we are unable to include the recording of this video in this presentation, but if you pause this recording now, it's well worth a watch. It lasts for 7 minutes and you'll find it on YouTube.
So here is Natalie Morris, and I read her book, Mixed and Other. Her father was Jamaican British, mother white British, and she's a journalist, does write for The Guardian occasionally. I found her book inspiring and related to pretty much everything she wrote about. In terms of the people she interviewed and their experiences, what you're going to see now is a lot of it I agree with in my life. So in terms of identity and belonging, mixed white and Asian is not the same as mixed Italian and Moroccan. So you can't lump everyone into a mixed population easily. So difficult to do statistics. Natalie herself says she's mixed and black, which kind of a bit relates to that video before. Tiger Woods is an interesting case. He calls himself Cablin Asian because he's got Thai, Chinese, Native American, African American, and Dutch heritage. But he doesn't describe himself as black, which I think is him recognizing that he's a person of mixed heritage. And they're often victims of other people defining who we are and not accepting their own description of themselves, so that other people don't accept who you define yourself as. That is incredibly othering in society, really. So this is someone's description of their upbringing. I was the only element of difference in a 100% white environment and was treated like a complete outsider. Pretty much, I concur with that one in my life. No one ever called me a half N word, half P word, or half W word, or even half S word. So yeah, you were definitely given the full works in terms of racism. Racial abuse was definitely worse in the 1960s and 70s. That's when I grew up. Hardly any mixed heritage people existed during those years. So this person said I was never going to find anyone to relate to, and that's exactly what happened for me. And without internet and social media, that was pretty much stuck. So in those years, people were discouraged and rejected for having mixed marriages, and then mixed heritage children were rejected, seen as embarrassing, and regularly put into care. So, but by the 2020s, things had turned around quite a bit. And I don't know what you could, probably a lot of media and US inputs had changed things by then. So now mixed heritage children are appearing on posters and billboards as beautiful. Some white women would like to have a mixed heritage child, as one of those people in the video, young people, said, "Can I have your child?" You know? So there's an exoticism that's been applied to mixed heritage and as objects to covet. And at work, we're seen as ambassadors who have to remain calm, serene, and non-threatening at all times. Mixed race status takes our roots away. That's an interesting description one of the interviewees of Natalie said to her. There is no collective history, but there's perhaps a collective understanding. And I think that's what I've found with other people with mixed heritage when I've spoken to them. There is a kind of collective understanding, really. My personal experience is replicated by several interviewees, which is that I didn't recognize myself as different in my psyche because of being surrounded in a white highland with all the white people I was with. So I mirrored them, but they treated me as a complete outsider, but I was seeing white all around me all the time. So that's quite a difficult psychological issue to cope with. As the only non-white kid in the school, how can anyone possibly understand what you're going through? Yeah. That's Frida Kahlo, by the way, whose father was Hungarian German, and her grandparents were native Mexicans. So both white parents' advice, this is someone who had a birth mother and stepfather who were white, and they told her to don't react and it will go away. So as I've put it, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me, was a big lie. Everyone is telling me I'm worthless. It would have helped to have some sense of my history and identity so that I would have understood who I was. That's someone saying this in an interview, and it concurs with me completely. One study found that mixed children are far less likely than non-mixed children to be close to their grandparents, and I wasn't close to mine, interestingly enough. So in the 2018 Journal of General Psychology, they found that the faces of mixed racial phenotypes are perceived as more attractive than white or black, which is why the corporations flood our screens and magazines and internet with images of people of mixed heritage, because they've worked out that it sells very well. I worry that mixed families are being used by advertisers and rendered voiceless. Yeah, absolutely. So they don't get into working in these companies. They just are the front door for selling their products and objectified sometimes. Mixed women who don't straighten their hair are told that they look too African and often lose work with big companies, and they're told you don't belong in an office. So pretty horrendous, really. And the Kardashians are seen by some people as having used their mixedness for image, but they're shielded because of their wealth from the systemic racism in the US. And a lot of people believe that the fetishization of mixed babies and children is a result of them, them and their similar influences. So here we are with a French, Scottish, American, Japanese and Indian mixed, and Naomi Osaka, who is again Japanese and African American mix. So all mixedness is measured against whiteness, and mixed non-white ethnicities are largely ignored. Whiteness is this protected space that can't be entered, and everyone else is on the other side. And that was from a Filipino Cameroonian woman celebrating her non-white mixedness. There's hierarchies of whiteness, and they dictate the race agenda. We need to unlearn the idea that race exists in a binary. So these are some questions that Natalie Morris poses in her book. How do we navigate the privileges that come with being mixed? The proximity to whiteness that can open doors. So there are chapters of her book which deals about white passing, which I didn't go into, not enough time today. How do we recognize the internalized racism or anti-blackness that can be absorbed and upheld by mixed individuals, which is why it's complex? How do we reconcile our privilege with mistrust, disapproval, and microaggressions that we also have to hear? So it's a bit of a seesaw. How do we ensure that conversations about mixedness aren't centered around whiteness, so that those mixed without white heritage are not sidelined? So this is Bilal Khan, who's also done videos. That picture is not him, but he talks about if he had £1 for every time someone made offensive or ignorant comments about his mixed race identity, then he would be able to go to countries that people say he should go back to. He's got a Jamaican mum and a South Asian dad. And he said it's no surprise that people with mixed platforms are unable to understand mixed race. With huge platforms, sorry, not mixed. So much of my experience of the world is influenced by how I am perceived and how I am treated by others. That's what he's saying. But on the positive side, he says when you've got childhood experiences of eating pilau rice at Eid and picking mango from grandma's backyard tree, you don't pick a side. All of that informs you of who you are. So that's, I think, the positives, really. So here we have a interesting situation. So you've got twins, one of whom is mixed heritage and the other one is white. So this is what genetics throws up sometimes. And these are the things that I wonder about. How does British society treat these individuals, especially when they appear together at school and walk around together? I suspect people just can't handle it, really. What does it say about British society that many people can't get their heads around the fact that they are siblings? And does the white British-looking twin end up advocating for and being an ally on occasions for their other twin? I wonder. So drawing towards the close now, trying to look at the positives of being mixed heritage. Mixed race heritage is a South African term that no one else seems to use. So I thought I'd put it in there towards the end. Yeah, these are things people said in Natalie's book, really, and elsewhere. Being mixed is a gift. I think Bilal, the guy who I showed you the slide of just before, illustrated that really. Identity can change through your life, so be open to challenges about your own sense of who you are. So in other words, you can learn about things and turn to positivity, which I think pretty much what happened to me. I used to feel I didn't belong anywhere, but then the more I grew, matured, and worked on personal development, I began to realize that I belong everywhere. I love that. It's really great. Rich and diverse cultural understanding can develop empathy. So yeah, I think understanding how complex the world is when you're growing up as a mixed heritage person can sometimes give you that empathy. Just depends really. Increased adaptability and resilience, including code switching abilities. So my children code switch linguistically in Polish and English. And I think there are other aspects to that as well. Bridge building potential, appreciating nuances and fostering connection, because you understand both in some way. Unique insights and perspectives on issues of race, identity and belonging can contribute to positive change. And that's the last slide with organisations which I can encourage you to look up. Intermix, they all do slightly different things. Intermix is for families, individuals and anyone who feels, you know, they can explore and join different groups on the site. People in Harmony is a really great organisation for information and support and finding more out about what it's like. Mixed Race Faces is a brilliant site which I encourage everyone to go onto. It has lots of photographs of people who are anonymised, and you can find out what their life's like in a kind of paragraph. And there's just hundreds of them, so you really get a bit of a cross section. And r/oblique mixed race, which is a Reddit page, that's a forum where people can discuss things. So there you go.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Neil. You've put so much work into that, and we really do appreciate that.
Sorry, I went over slightly.
No worries. But we do have time now for people to ask questions or share briefly their own experiences. We don't have very long, so if you can, if you're sharing your experience, if you could keep it fairly brief to make sure that we get enough people sharing. This is being recorded at the moment, but the screen will be blurred, so no one's faces will be seen as they share. And there will be time after 9:30 when we're not recording, if anyone wants to kind of leave any contributions to them. But let me stop now, and if you could just indicate either by physically putting your hand up if your camera's on the screen, or using the tools of Zoom. I'll take some questions for Neil now, or comments. Who'd like to go first?
We've got one in the chat from Ray asking, is mixed heritage / mixed race a question related to parents / grandparents being white and black, or East Asian, South Asian? I'm Anglo-German, so I guess I'm dual heritage, but being white, does race come into that at all?
It's an interesting question. I think that in terms of heritage, that's two white European nations, and I would suggest that that comes under in Australia. If you went there, they would categorize you as someone who wasn't white Australian, but I would suggest that it's probably not seen as mixed heritage in Britain. That's my it's not definitive, that's just my initial reaction to it. And that's partly because it's about what happens to you as a mixed heritage person, really, and whether you're walking down the street or in certain contexts like I've been showing you in the training, and you're treated as, where are you from, where are you really from? Those are the sorts of things I think that you can measure this by in a better way than, you know, those are my thoughts anyway.
Yeah, are you being asked to classify yourself?
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions or comments that people have they'd like to ask directly? There was a issue a bit earlier that someone said, aren't we all mixed race? And I think there is something in that, isn't there? When I traced my heritage a number of years ago, it gave me a migration plan to show where my phenotype had come from. And of course, at the end of the day, every white person is a faded African, because we all originate from Africa. So we're all some kind of mixed race, aren't we? But maybe there's a different category here in terms of how we're being classed. People have been classed in this day and age. Glasson, you got your hand up first, and then we'll come on to Jasser after that.
Hi, good day. Thanks for the lecture. It was really interesting, and it is a massive, broad subject. But I just wondered, did you, for the host, for the speaker, Neil, did you receive discrimination from the different religious sides of your family?
No, because my father didn't practice his Hindu faith, and in 1952, when he arrived here, there weren't any Hindu temples, apart from maybe one in London. So he chose not to follow it, he kept it sort of personal. And so, yeah, I didn't have any clashes, and I wasn't brought up a Christian anyway. So in my case, it didn't happen. But I know that in some cases it does, and that can be an issue. I understand where you're coming from, Glaston. It can be an issue that can end up dividing the person themselves into. Because Bilal, the one I showed you the slide of, I saw a YouTube video of him talking about what his life had been like, and the South Asian part of his family didn't really accept the Jamaican part very well. So I don't know if that was religious, cultural, or what, but just to give an example of, I think probably what you were looking at a bit more.
Yeah, because I'm a counsellor, and I've done a lot of work with varying different types of mixed race people. And when you're in a situation where you've got a white parent and a Pakistan or Indian parent, they really suffer, because they're just they really get a hard time, as a lot of people do. But from when you're supposed to be from a religious background and everything's peace and love, and they get shunned from there as well, it's a really bad experience.
I acknowledge that.
Yeah. Jasser, you've got a question.
Hi, yeah, my name's Jasper Alawali. I just want to thank Anna for inviting me along tonight. I'm an actor. I'm also an author of the book Both Not Half, which is all about mixed heritage identity, that came out just last year. It's just come out in paperback. I just wanted to share, I mean, it's wonderful to be a part of the evening tonight, and just know that spaces like this exist. But also, I think I've had, I think my stories had resonated, I think, with people that have come across it, because I look so white, and yet I am mixed, and I have, and I feel fully both my Punjabi self. I grew up speaking the language, spending time in India, and British English, and I think one of the big things that I think just something that I wanted to share, and something that comes up in a lot of the events and conversations that I've had, is that I think often the mixed experience is treated as being inherently an experience of being conflicted and of feeling caught between two worlds. And I think because even when we talk about it, it sort of takes on this, there's this inherent struggle, and that is the sort of the nature of being mixed. It sometimes hides the fact that actually, for a lot of mixed people growing up in their early days, before their encounter with society within their families, they were able to experience themselves as fully and wholly themselves. And that was actually very much my experience growing up. And there were sort of three factors that allowed that to happen. One was that my white mum made a big effort with the language and so that within our house it was a very mixed, and my whole self was able to flourish. My turban wearing grandfather was a teacher in my primary school, so even within my school environment I was able to flourish, and my sense of self was known and understood. And then I was growing up in Leicester, this incredibly mixed
Hmm.
city where, you know, half the city shut down for Diwali, and then there was also the big Christmas market. So I never felt a sense of conflict. And actually, I think what's been so wonderful when I've been speaking to people about, and the idea, you know, saying, thinking of yourselves as being both or whole rather than half and fractured, has been that actually the sort of the baseline experience can actually be joy. It's just actually the way in which society is set up and structured that enforces these categories and forces us to split ourselves. And I think a big part of what my own journey led me to realize was that, and I'm sure this is something that you've covered in other sessions as well, is how the a sort of a world in which a world in which mixed people belong is a world in which everyone belongs, because the categorization and the way in which society is fractured and split and people are divided and ruled, these are all the same techniques. And so really I've come to understand that there is a need for sort of solidarity and allyship, which I know this is the whole purpose of this, but real solidarity is not just about you know, being like, well, I support what you're doing. It's realizing that that fight is your fight. And I found that with in terms of when it's come to like solidarity with like LGBTQ plus politics and queer liberation, the politics of class. My mixed heritage journey led me to trade unionism, and just if we touch briefly on like the spiritual side of things, religious side of things as well, it's really deepened my understanding of more particularly I come from a Sikh background, but the sort of the non-duality that sits at the heart of pretty much all religious traditions, at least in their mystical forms. So I think you're right. It's wonderful this space exists, because the mixed experience is often seen as fringe and somehow sort of, you know, a footnote to the history of race. But actually, I think it is at the heart of it, because you know, you can't have a concept of mixing. So you can't have a concept of racial purity without mixing, as sort of discussed in the talk. But it's where people mix is where race gets policed. And I think that actually means that mixed people are really often at the heart, at the center of it. Like in British Indian history, you had like legislation was brought in to stop Anglo-Indian people from being able to serve in the civil and military services post American independence because of a fear of a similar uprising in India.
And thanks, Jess. I appreciate all that. Thank you very much. I just was going to respond very quickly. I know Angela wants to say something. In the I learned from what didn't happen for me. So with our children, they went to Poland as often as they could, which is at least every 2 years, and sometimes 3 times a year. They learned the language. Their mother spoke it to them from square one. Their middle names were, one was Polish, one was Indian. So if you teach children their roots and you flood them with information about it, then they have much surer identities about who they are, and they then can embrace things, and that's what they've done. So I took them to India when the youngest was about 8, and you know that's they're still in touch with all their relatives there on social media. Thank God for them. Anyway, I just thought I'd illustrate that really. Go on, Angela. What did you want to say?
Well, yeah, before we do, just thanks for joining us. So you'd be far too modest to publicize yourself in the chat, so I've done that for you.
Thank
Your
you.
website there, and a link to your book on Amazon as well. So, but thank you for joining us. That's so lovely to hear the richness from your experience too as well.
Thank you.
Angela, over to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you, Neil, because you clearly put so much work into this, and it's so full of humanity. And I hope it didn't take too much of a toll on you as you put it together. But I was so struck by how divisive it is to measure everything against whiteness, and how the opposite of divisive, how joining it is to teach mixed heritage children about all their roots, and that lovely quote about belonging everywhere. So I'm really, really grateful for everything you've put into this, and struck by both the positives and the negatives, and this terrible thing of measuring everything against whiteness, but this beautiful thing of being able to belong everywhere with proper knowledge of your roots.
Thank you, Angela.
Thanks, Angela. Right.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Neil. I think that's been really very useful to unravel and unwrap the lots of these kinds of issues. I've just come back from Switzerland. I've been away with the family for a few weeks and I had several conversations with people about, oh, you're in London. Well, isn't England becoming an Islamic country? And what about knife crime? And so they have all these kind of very negative things about Britain and about some things that are happening in their own countries to do with migration. My fear is that whilst we have made progress and we need to make, and a lot more progress needs to be made, you know, mixed race and black becomes migrant and it all gets lumped into, you know, you have stolen our country away from us. And Douglas Murray and others have been writing about this, about European heritage, which where they really mean white heritage, has been somehow diluted or stolen from white people because of the presence of Afro-Caribbean and South Asians and East Asians in numbers in Britain. And I think, you know, it's going to become harder, I think. And I think the other thing that I've noticed is there's a war on empathy. That means towards migration, towards migrants, towards refugees. And I think, you know, and anybody of color will get lumped into that kind of equation as certainly people who want to see a resurgence of white privilege and to be seen as trying to protect white privilege. You know, they will be pointing the finger at and attacking anybody of any color or mixed heritage and lumping them all in the same way.
Thanks, Ray. Looks like Denise is home. She got off the train. She's home. Fantastic. Thank you for your dedication to joining us on the train. Are you in a position to ask your question, Denise?
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, I'm mixed. And I didn't really experience nothing growing up. I didn't experience no racism or anything. Yeah, everything was all right, apart from, I don't know, maybe back then, maybe, I don't know, but maybe, you know, a black woman with a white man, I don't know. Maybe it was seen as, you know, wrong.
Everything's
I wouldn't
about
know.
context, isn't it, Denise? You
Yeah,
see? So that's why I was talking about so many people who grew up as mixed heritage 40 odd years ago, and there certainly wasn't that kind of experience as anything that was normal. So, and
yeah,
now I think as decades have gone on, then there's much more chance of people having more supportive upbringings. Yeah.
yeah.
So not just family, but environment, community, and all the rest of it. So
Mm-hmm.
I think things, you know, this is my personal perspective on this. Really, it's not, but it's certainly if you read those books, what comes out mostly, they're not interviewing teenagers. Yeah, and even the teenagers in
Yeah,
the video I showed, even the teenagers in the video I showed you what life's like for them.
yeah,
But you know what I'm saying? I think you probably find teenagers are more positive about it than I could have been in the 70s. I certainly hope so. I think that's and it's whether they can cling on to that in the face of what Ray talked about. Really,
yeah,
that's what I
yeah,
wonder. you know, that's what we'll
Yeah.
see how society will go.
I mean, I think to be mixed now, it's okay. I don't know what it was like back in the 70s.
For some people, horrific.
Um,
Mm.
okay.
Yeah.
Why though? I don't understand why.
Why?
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to. Yeah. Well, I've been videoed and I say a fair amount about what it was like. So maybe when the video comes out, you'll be able to check that out, Denise.
Was it the
Yes.
fact of a black woman with a white man, and you know, you know, she's got children? Was it wrong for that? Was she
Yeah,
wrong for that?
there was a lot of prevalence of that attitude. Definitely.
If
Definitely.
a
Yeah.
black woman with a white man? I mean,
Yeah. Miscegenation, disapproval, and all the rest of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to mention and I think I mentioned this before, Angela, who's also on the screen here, has interviewed Neil and recorded a longer story on video, which is going to be released, I promise you. Unfortunately, I've had a fairly major PC malfunction, which has got all my videos,
Oh,
so I'm just trying to retrieve that at the moment. So I'm working off my laptop at the moment. So they are coming. Apologies to Angela and Neil. And others that I promised those two. They will be on the way, and you can hear a bit more about Neil's story. Let's see if we've got anyone else who wants to ask a question or make a comment. We've got a chance potentially for a couple more. Thanks, Denise, for joining us tonight. Anyone else like to?
no, thank you. It's been really helpful.
Great.
Yeah, thank you, Adrian.
Okay. Anyone else like to share? Heather, I think you're with Glaston, aren't you? I'm seeing Glaston in the background.
Yes, yes, yeah. Hi, can you hear me? Well, 'cause I've got a headphone in.
We can. It's a bit muffled, but yeah.
I'll turn it off. Sorry. So, I'm Heather, I'm mixed race. But I just wanted to add in a spanner in the works, if you like, of my mixed race experience. Growing up, I've got a brother and a sister who are a lot darker than me. With brown eyes, I've got green eyes, I've got light skin. My mum's black and my dad is white, which was also a bit of a unusual combination when I was growing up. It was usually the other way around. So I kind of also didn't get much cultural input from either side, which again I think is a bit of an odd experience compared to, you know, the majority maybe. But obviously being mixed race is very individual experience as well. So yeah, growing up, I had racism from white people. I had racism from black people. I also had racism from other mixed race people, which is a bit, you know, it was really difficult finding my identity. Who do I fit? And am I too white? Am I too black? My name's also Heather, just from my dad, my Scottish dad. So things like, I don't know, going to school, college, university, job interviews, I turn up, my name's Heather, and I get the, oh, I wasn't expecting you, literally every time. It gets a bit, I don't know. It's a bit like I expect it, but then I'm just like, are we not moved on in life anymore? Like, you know, I'm not that different looking to other people. I've still got curly hair. Do you know what I mean? And I'm slight tan. You can, you know, guess. And the interrogation part as well, Neil. Sorry, thank you for your presentation. It was amazing. But the interrogation part, where are you from? Where are your parents from? And the answer for me to other people is, I don't hardly know. I do a bit, you know, but it sets off a bit of a wanting to know in my head, but there's no one for me to ask on quite a lot of the sides of my family. My dad died when I was 9, and his parents, my white grandparents, were dead before I was born, I think, or not long after. And a similar story to, you know, my Jamaican Indian grandma, died when I was 7, I think. My granddad not long passed away. So at the moment, I currently pretty much more identify or know a lot more about my Dominican side of my family. But if I went to Dominica, they're not going to look at me and go, "Oh yeah, she's one of us." You know what I mean? So it's where do I fit in? So this is what I experienced growing up. And to be fair, being on this forum here, I'm starting to go through it again. Do you know what I mean? It's not. I'm not saying it's a negative thing. It just makes you think again. But it's a good conversation to be having. And that's my experience. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Heather. Really appreciate that. And I just want to thank anyone who hasn't got white skin like me, or just who is sharing their experience and where racism is in the mix, because it can be costly just to kind of tell your story, even just to hear the stories. And I get that, and I really do appreciate Neil for you, but also for everyone here that's been sharing their stories and experiences too. Really quite humbled that you should join us and share in that way. So thank you. Yeah, and I don't know, Heather, whether you've read any Afua Hirsch's book, British, but she kind of talks about a similar kind of thing about, you know, where does she actually belong, and you know, and those questions about her heritage, and I guess the colour as well, in natives. Those are two that I've really impacted me, but there'll be others as well, and of course Jassa also sharing his experiences even on our Zoom this evening. What the time is marching on, and I'm going to need to draw the session to a close officially, but after 9:30 I'm going to turn the recording off, and if anyone wants to stay for a little bit longer, then please feel free and share whatever you want to share there. But I just want to round things off for this evening, of course, by thanking Neil again for everything he's put into this. Really appreciate that, all the hard work you put in, Neil. Just a few thoughts about, if I can get my computer to work. Yes, the rest of our program. So in February, we started our 2025 program looking at decolonization, colonized mindset. That was the part 3 in our decolonization series. This is the second of 2025, hidden racism, the mixed heritage experience, the third of our series there. Next time, I'm delighted to say that one of our Council of Reference members, Neil Charlton, is going to be leading us on the first of our series of pre-colonial world history. It's going to be focusing on African history. That's pre-colonial stuff, because we often hear things from the empire onwards, but not really honouring the history of other parts of the world apart from Europe. So that's 16th of July. Do put that in your diaries. I hope you can make it. And the next in our Hidden Racism series in October during Black History Month, when we're going to be looking at rural racism. Is our countryside a welcoming place for all? And if not, what can we do about it? So that's the rest of our program 2025. And as I mentioned, that recording will be made available of an audience with Neil in the next few months. So I do promise that will be coming. Yeah, all those meetings are on Zoom, 8 to 9:30. Just also to draw your attention to the Padlet board, resource board. If you go onto the White Allies website, that's whiteallies.net, click on the resources tab. You can join the website there. You won't be sent loads of spam, don't worry about that. But it gives you access to the links to about 400 different resources. Some of them are videos, some of them are articles, some are poems. There's all kinds of stuff on there. With under about 30 different topics. So if you want to educate yourself or just explore the issues more or help educate other people, those resources are there freely available to everyone that joins the website. And to keep informed of future programs and future meetings, then do join us either as an aspiring white ally like me, or as someone of color who can be a co-mentor for us on our journey, and will join us in that way. We'll keep you informed if you join on our website. So that's about it. Yeah, so I mentioned that already in terms of signing up. Thank you again, Neil, very much. And I'm going to stop recording now, stop sharing screen, and just open the floor for maybe a bit more conversation too.